Talking about hearing loss and hearing solutions tonight. If you have a question, go ahead and call in. 615-737-PLUS is the number to call. I have Dr. David Gnewikow with Advanced Hearing Solutions here with me. Thanks again for coming in.
Glad to be here.
I want you to tell me about hearing aids. There are several different brands out there.
Sure.
They all offer something a little different.
Sure.
But you've told me before there's not a lot of difference among them. Is that a good way to characterize it?
Sure. So this is the big dirty secret that nobody wants me to tell you in the hearing aid industry.
Okay.
There are literally thousands of hearing aids on the market in the United States. Think of it kind of like automobiles. There are some major brands and they all have different shapes and models and sizes of that. But you can also think of it like automobiles. A lot of automobiles are made by the same company and labeled separately. So are hearing aids.
Okay.
So there are 5 major manufacturers of hearing aids or distributors of hearing aids, let's say, in the U.S. And not all those companies are U.S. companies, but 5 kind of major, let's call them brand names. Certainly, I think all of them kind of have their niches or advantages and disadvantages. But to me, when it comes down to success with hearing aids and how people hear, I don't really care what the brand name is. And my manufacturer or my manufacturers listening to this will be mad if they hear that.
Like,
but here's why I say that. Success with hearing aid depends about 20% on the hearing aid and 80% on how that hearing aid is fit or adjusted to the patient.
Okay.
So I have patients come in all the time and say, what is the best brand? And I'll say, I don't really care. It is more important that we fit that hearing aid accurately and get it adjusted specifically to your hearing loss, to your ear, because that makes a significant difference in how we fit the hearing aids, and to their lifestyle. Everybody's lifestyle is different, so what my patient who is a plumber needs is not the same as my patient who is an airline pilot, or my patient who's a business guy that's traveling. I mean, people have different environments, different listening needs, and it's more about tailoring that specific device to their environment, to their hearing, than it necessarily is, well, you need X brand, Y brand, or Z brands. Now, I do have my favorites, but my favorites are not about that I feel like I can make somebody hear 96% with this brand and 84% with this brand. It's more about customer service or durability or things. If you come into my office and I say, if we recommend this device, I am confident that it's going to be durable and last you a long time, and if you have a problem, they have good customer service and we can take care of it. I am more concerned with that than brand A, brand B, or brand C.
That's fantastic. Let's get to the lines. We have Russ on the line. Russ, you're starting us off tonight. What's your question? Go ahead, Russ.
Yes, hi, yes.
Go ahead.
Well, I have questions about tinnitus. I have, you know, a vast issue with it myself, and just wondered if there are devices that counteract the sound, or you know, medications, which I've never really got much information about.
Okay, Russ, I'm going to hang up so you can listen to your TV for the answer here, okay? Thank you for calling in tonight.
Okay, Russ, that's a very good question. It seems pretty common that I get asked that question. I was asked that question today in clinic. So tinnitus or tinnitus, both pronunciations are actually correct. It is a result of some type of damage to the auditory system. So in your inner ear, there is a system of nerves. There are some cells called hair cells that pick up basically the vibration of sound as it travels into the inner ear. Those little nerve endings or hair cells detect vibration, fire the nerve. That sound then goes through the auditory canal to the brainstem and up to the brain. That's how we process sound. That's more than you asked for right there, but that's kind of how the hearing system works. When we have tinnitus, what's happening is there is something in that neural system, in those the nerves, that's not working correctly. And so, for lack of a better word, and this is a way oversimplification, there's almost like a shorted out circuit. When there's not a signal there, the brain is creating a signal, or the nervous system is creating a signal because something is wrong. And what we hear is, we hear a sound that's basically going on all the time. So that's just a description of what happens with tinnitus. I say all that for a purpose. I'll get to really answering your question in a second, Russ. But the reason I say that is some people, when they begin to perceive tinnitus, or they have this sudden onset because of a noise that they were exposed to or something has caused it, it is very alarming because your brain is telling you, hey, something is wrong. Why am I having this sound? What can be done about it? And the answer, unfortunately, is there is not a quote-unquote cure for tinnitus. So, Russ, you're exactly right. If you've done research on medications that treat tinnitus, there is nothing out there that has been shown clinically, proven scientifically, to cause tinnitus to go away. Now, I've seen ads on the internet and I've seen ads on television and in the drugstore that say, oh, this is going to cure it. I'll just say there's not any scientific evidence that show that those things work. There are really two things that can help with the perception of tinnitus. One is using something called a masker or a habituator, and those two things are a little bit different, but they function on the same principle, and that is they actually emit a sound into the ear that either, number one, covers up what we hear, or number two, tries to train the brain to ignore that sound is there. But the second thing, and this is what most people do effectively, is actually the use of hearing aids. Now, if somebody has perfectly normal hearing and they have tinnitus, I am unlikely to recommend buying hearing aids if the only reason is just to take away the tinnitus. But it is sort of a great benefit of hearing aids for people with hearing loss who have tinnitus at the same time. The research shows that 60 to 70% of people who wear hearing aids and have tinnitus will report a significant reduction in their perception of the sound when they have that device in. And I can explain that very simply. It's harder to hear your tinnitus when you're watching television or when you're in a noisy restaurant than it is when you're laying in bed quiet at night, because there are other sounds that mask or cover up that tinnitus. I've mentioned this before on the show. I have a hearing loss in my left ear, came from a loud gunshot many years ago, and I have constant tinnitus. Started the instant that gunshot happened in, let's see, I'm not going to tell you how long ago. I'll tell you how old I was. That'll give things away. But over 20 years ago, and it has never once stopped. So I hear it all the time. Started wearing a hearing aid several years ago because that loss progressed. When I take this out, mine increases double. I mean, 100% it goes up, and I can barely hear it when I'm wearing a hearing aid. Why? Because as I'm talking, I'm getting these high-pitched sounds that cover up that high-pitched ringing, or I can hear the fans running, or in my office I can hear printers going. I get some more input that tends to mask that out. So I wish I could tell you it were as simple as, well, if you just do this exercise and eat these Brussels sprouts and, you know, follow whatever the rules are, that we could make it go away. For most people, that is not the case, and for most people, unfortunately, it is more of a permanent condition.
And it seems so common whenever we do this show.
Yes.
We get a ton of calls about this.
Right. And I think a big part of that is, you know, people don't know what it is. They go to their primary care doctor and he says, well, I don't know, maybe we'll get you a hearing test. Maybe you go for a hearing test, maybe you don't. And that's one of the reasons, Russ, I spent a couple minutes sort of explaining that, because I want people to understand what's happening. Most of the time, tinnitus in and of itself is not the sign of something terrible. Certainly we recommend if it starts suddenly and you don't have a good reason, or if it's just in one ear and it's not happening in both, you know, those can be some signs that it's worth having a test and getting things checked out. But for guys who've worked around noise their whole lives, or people you know that they have some hearing loss and they say, well, my ears have been ringing for 15 or 20 years, that is a pretty common side effect, I guess I'll say, of having hearing loss. And
I know you have said before, for folks, at night usually it gets worse because everything kind of gets quiet.
Absolutely.
And so that ringing gets louder, but maybe turning on a fan or having something like that can help.
Sure. So, I mean, sometimes it helps to even sleep with NewsChannel 5 on. Do I get a bonus for saying that? Okay. No, turning on the TV, radio, fan, those type of things can really, I won't say it's going to make it go away. It just gives some other sound to mask it. So I've even had patients that have gone and bought little noisemakers that make rain noise. I mean, there's lots of different things you can do. A lot of people, once they've had it a long time, it becomes far less annoying. You know, again, I can just speak from personal experience. Sure. When this first happened to me, I thought, this is the most annoying thing ever. I'm never going to get used to it. Here, 20-something years later, I might go a week and not even notice that it's there. When we start talking about it, I think about it, and maybe I can hear it a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you explain to me what happens if someone walks into your office as a new patient? What's the process?
Sure. So, For first-time patients, we do a free consultation, and I've mentioned that on the show before, and we mentioned that kind of in all of our interactions with patients. We look at that first visit as a time for the patient to as much interview us as it is for us to interview them. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, as you are looking for a hearing care professional, you really want somebody that's going to listen to your needs, that is going to explain things. And so I've had people come in and say, I don't want you to do hearing tests, I just want to talk to you. That's fine. We're willing to set aside that time to do that because we feel like we're going to do a good job of listening to the patient and making good suggestions for help. So that initial evaluation is at no charge. You call our office. I'm sure we'll have the number up, but it's 615-758-7999, and again, we're in Mount Juliet. Talk to our receptionist there. We will make an appointment. You will see one of our doctors of audiology where we'll sit down, go through kind of what you're experiencing, listen to your story, and do a hearing test. And at that point, after a hearing test, we can very accurately tell you, number one, is there a problem? And number two, if there is a problem, how much we can help. I think expectations are huge. Whether you're buying a hearing aid or a car or making an investment, I think you need to know both the positives and negatives of that. So we usually schedule an hour to an hour and a half for those appointments where we'll explain. We recommend bringing a spouse or significant other, daughter, son, whoever is most important in your life with your hearing, bring them with you, because I cannot say how many times somebody's come in and I've explained it and they say, oh, I wish I'd brought my husband so he could hear this, or I wish I'd brought my wife because she just thinks I'm ignoring her, and there is so much more to hearing than just what they hear in that booth. It's about relationship. It's about how you do your job or how you interact with people that are important with you. So we kind of go through that process. At the end of that, if somebody needs some help, certainly we can make recommendations for hearing aids or something along those lines. If people do hearing aids with us, we do them at a free 30-day trial. That allows you to go to your Christmas gathering and see how you hear. It allows you to ride in the car with your grandkids in the back, or with your wife next to you, or with your husband fussing at you, or whatever. It allows you to go to a restaurant, because I can put hearing aids on people in our office and say, now isn't this great? See how well you can hear me. Hearing me is not the problem. Hearing that person that's important, hearing in that more difficult environment, a teacher hearing in the classroom, hearing the sermon at church, whatever is important to the individual, those are the situations that we want them to experience in their trial, because that way they have some real data, some real evidence to say, okay, this is helping me and it's worth making that investment. You don't sign on the dotted line until you've worn them for a month, and that way people really know that they're going to get some benefit.
And that is very important to know about that trial period, which is the law, no matter where people go, because sometimes that's not so clear in other places.
That's right, and I've shared stories about that before. There is a federal mandate that hearing aids are fit on a trial basis, meaning no matter where you get them, you have the right to return those hearing aids within 30 days for at least a partial refund. Now, the law doesn't say it has to be a full refund, although we do it at zero cost to the patient, but a lot of places will have a $200, $300, $500 charge, and that's not unreasonable if somebody spent 4 hours with you, to recuperate a little bit. But it is a federal law that you are allowed to try hearing aids, and you do not have to purchase them within that 30-day period. And I have had patients who have come in and say, I bought some hearing aids 4 or 5 years ago. They've never worked for me, and I hate to go into this again because I spent all of this money on them. And I say, well, why didn't you return them? Well, they never told me that I could return them. And there probably was, by law, some little fine print written somewhere. So I say that just so you guys out there know that that is a right that you have, whether you see us or see somebody else, to be able to try that before you're required to make an investment in it.
And if somebody comes in and hearing aids are appropriate, I'm sure you all spend time with fitting them and then making sure people are comfortable with them, taking them in, taking them out, caring for them.
Absolutely. So that's probably, I think everything you ask me, I say, well, that's the most important part. But this is a very important part of the process. So what we do is, after that initial evaluation, if somebody decides, okay, I'm ready, let's give this a try, we usually schedule them to come back again, ask a spouse, family member, whatever, to come in as we sort of go through that process. The fitting process is extremely important because, as we talked about before, when I said, you know, I don't care so much about the brand of the hearing aids or the model, the fitting process is what I care about. We do something called a probe microphone measurement every time we fit a hearing aid. So we set our patient down, we have a computer system, we actually put microphones in the ears. That sounds horrible, but it's just a little tiny tube, you can barely feel it. But that lets us measure what that hearing aid is actually doing in that patient's ear. And that's how you fit a hearing aid to their prescription. Not click a button and say, well, how does that sound? That's not very scientific. So we can set the hearing aid specifically to that person's prescription, kind of teach them how to use it, go through maintenance and care, which nowadays is very simple. We've got rechargeable, they're very low maintenance. So used to, that took 30 minutes of explaining how do you change the battery and what do you do here, and that gets a lot simpler as technology gets better. But the other part of that visit is I always give people my realistic expectations speech. You know, here's what you should expect when you walk out the door. These are the things that you're going to notice differently. These are the things I want you to write down or pay attention to, and we bring them back in 2 weeks. And at that point, again, come back, give us some feedback. These 3 things have been really good. You know, TV's better, church is better. This is sort of bugging me a little bit. Can we adjust the fit? And we usually do a total of 3 visits. So that initial, actually 4, initial consultation, initial fitting, and 2 follow-up visits. That way the person has time to go out into the world and experience sound, get some ideas of what's good, what's bad, and we have time to make adjustments on that before they're required to make a final decision. Because I have had people come back after 2 weeks and go, you know what, this is not helping me enough. I want to return my hearing aids. And I'll say, well, tell me what's happening. And they'll say, well, you know, I'm still struggling in this environment, and this environment, and this environment, and I was sort of hoping for better. We make some adjustments, say, okay, let's bump you up a little bit. They come back in another 2 weeks and go, wow, that's a whole lot better. And everybody is different, kind of how they transition into wearing hearing aids. Some people are instantly, we put them in and it's the greatest thing they've ever done. Sometimes it takes a few adjustments to get there.
I know a family member has said when he got hearing aids, I can hear everything now and it's annoying, you know, the birds chirping, and he's not a negative Nancy by any means, but if you haven't heard that thing, you know, that thing for years, all of a sudden it requires a lot of attention.
Sure, and I'll say 2 things to that. First off, good. Right. You know, I mean, that's sort of the whole purpose of people coming in is say, I want to hear better, and they hear better, and sometimes that's a little bit alarming, but that's a good thing. I mean, as long as things are not uncomfortable. I want you to hear the water running. I want you to hear your ice clinking in the ice maker in the freezer. You know, I want you to hear the birds chirping. But we can overdo that. And I have seen a lot of people who tried hearing aids and were not successful and returned them because their initial fitting was too loud. And not that it was too loud necessarily by what their prescription is, but that it was too loud for them to get used to it. And so what I always do, what my other audiologists always do, is we start them out a little bit low. If this is your first time wearing a hearing aid, I'm not going to set you to full blast on day 1 because I don't want this to be overwhelming. I want people to walk out of our office and go, okay, I'm picking up more, but it's not this overwhelming sensation. Then gradually over time, we'll tune them up just a little bit to where in the end of the month, or maybe even somewhere 6 months down the road, we may bump them up to their full prescription. But that makes that whole process a little bit easier. If you've ever tried hearing aids and that's been your experience of, oh my goodness, this is way too loud, I'll never be able to wear them, that's not what that experience should be like. It should be a lot more comfortable to start with.
And also, too, some people may have some old memories in their head about their grandfather or an older relative, you know, tuning the hearing aid and the squealing. And then the other thing, too, is a complaint that I've heard, you know, when you have little kids in the room, they're being very loud. It's like, whoa, this, you know, it just amplifies that.
Sure. So, first off, a hearing aid should never squeal. If a hearing aid squeals, something is wrong. Either it's not fit correctly in the ear, or you didn't get it in all the way, or wax in the ear, or the hearing aids fit wrong. I mean, all of those things can kind of go into a hearing aid squealing, but there should be absolutely no fear. If you see an audiologist that knows what they're doing, you should not have any it's called feedback or whistling out of the hearing aid. But yes, we've all had that guy sitting in front of us in church and didn't know his hearing aid was squealing because he can't hear, you know, and that can be very embarrassing. That was much more of a problem 20 years ago, 15 years ago. Now we have digital hearing aids that have digital feedback suppression, that if it detects it, it can automatically cancel it. I mean, so that should not be a problem. That should not be a problem at all.
Okay, good. We're going to take another quick break. If you have a question, I encourage you to call 615-737. Plus, we'll get those lined up during the break. We're coming right back.